Hello and welcome to an isolated episode of Sutton Impact Family Style, number 160, Dad. 160.
160. Who would have thunk it?
I know.
Calling from our respective caves. Hope everybody's doing well. I hope you're social distancing. I really hope you've locked yourself down because that's really the best way. And I know it sounds crazy, but I mean, you can't come into contact. You can't do what you're going to do. I mean, I'm here with Sharon and Sharon's sister Janet, who was staying in Clearwater Beach. We were down in Clearwater Beach. We left after they shut the beach. So now we're home at Shea Sutton on Magnolia Chase in Tampa, and I envision us being here until May.
Yeah, I think that's what it's looking like around the country.
So before we start the show, everybody, I would make time every day to call somebody and talk to a different human that you're not in contact with, and keep your relationships going, and just have some things in your life. Don't talk about the virus. Talk about your friendships. Talk about things that are important to you.
Yeah.
Talk about Tom Brady being a Buccaneer.
And
Who would have thunk that 6 months ago?
Certainly not. I mean, like I said, I always assumed he was just going back to New England again.
And I always assumed he was going to be a Charger.
And I told you, I bizarrely had a complete 180. And now, after the Steelers, I am rooting for Tom Brady and the Bucs to be in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, you know what? I can root for him now. He's not part of the Patriots, and he is the GOAT. And I live in Tampa, so those are all positives.
I still dislike the Patriots, and I grudgingly respect but really dislike Belichick. But Brady, I think anybody that dedicated to what they do, and I've never even read the TB12 literature, but I mean, I know that, he goes to bed at like 8 o'clock at night, and he does everything he possibly can, including like not eating, tomatoes because they're inflammatory. Like he just goes so crazy to try and continue to do what he loves to do, and
I just read something about not eating tomatoes or eggplant.
Yeah.
As those are two fruits that were not part of the American diet, not part of the old the European diet, the Mediterranean diet, the ancient diet that we always talk about.
Yeah.
Because those foods weren't introduced till after Columbus.
It's true, but I can't see myself not eating tomato sauce. Like, it just,
No, I can't either, so it's going to be hard.
Yeah. I was like, that, and then you add in barbecue sauce, and those are, it's not happening.
All right, well screw that then. I'm not going to go away from I'm not going to start eating less raw tomato, I guess.
Yeah, I'll cut down on raw. I don't really eat a lot of raw tomato, so maybe that's where I'll run to. But yeah, that's like.
So staying on our TB thing, how much credence do you give to the fact that the split started because Belichick wanted to trade Brady and keep Garoppolo, and Robert Kraft stopped him and made him trade Garoppolo and keep Brady?
Since that time has happened, it's been 3 years or 2 years, right? And they've won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, they won a Super Bowl.
I mean, I'm sure on some level Brady would like. I mean, having been fortunate enough to be an actor on a few major things here and there, like I've gotten my ass kissed, and it doesn't suck, And yeah. Belichick's not going to do that, despite the fact that he's the greatest quarterback of all time. Belichick is not going to, give him any sort of, extra love or.
Yeah.
But I also wonder, you've changed careers in your life. I've changed careers. Dan's changed careers. Like, he's been with the Patriots for his entire NFL pro career. He's never got to experience anything out of it. He's the greatest quarterback of all time. 9 Super Bowls, 6 wins. Nobody's even come close. Who knows if anyone will again? Like, maybe he just wants to, step on a little lawn, really check out the other grass,
Well, I would root for them to win the Super Bowl because I'd like him to go. I think he'd go out on that note.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see him go on a high note. He's earned it. Like I said, I can like him right now. The Bucs have been bad for so long.
So long.
And one time they had a 10,000 person waiting list, and then this year they were only averaging in the 50s. So I know that I think they can actually sell out every game with Brady. They have great. I mean, the Packers come into town. Breeze comes into town. I forget who the third quarterback is. So I mean, there's some good quarterbacking duels and some good games.
And I think
hopefully we play them.
I think there's something to be said for him wanting to do it outside of the Belichick, because I think
so too.
because I do feel like that narrative has been there his entire career of like, sort of the opposite of Phil Jackson, where it's like, yeah, Phil Jackson won all those titles, but it's like you had Michael, Scotty, Shaq, and Kobe. So it's like, you're a good coach, but how good are you really? And, and with Brady, it's like, yeah, you're a great quarterback, and they're always like, well, Matt Castle won 12 games with the Patriots, and it's like, yeah, but they didn't do anything in a bad division, so, but I'm sure that's...
One of my all-time favorite sports broadcasters was Bob Prince of the Pirates back until the early 70s. And he had this saying called hidden vigorish. And it would mean the more you win, the closer you are to losing. And the better it is, the closer you are to not being good. So I think Boston got some hidden vigorish this year.
Yeah.
Tom Brady, Mookie Betts.
Yeah. Definitely.
So we'll see. I mean, I think Belichick will, I don't know if he'll tank, but he's earned the right to, and the Kraft said they all have, they'll just let that thing run down, get a good quarterback, and start building back up again.
Yeah.
But also, it's not going to be the romp through the AFC East that it's always been.
No, it is not.
Miami's gotten better. The Jets should be better, and Buffalo is better. So it should be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. Well, on a non-sports note, we're going to do something today that I've seen on, Reddit. I've seen it on Twitter. I've seen a number of places. Most recently, Ryan Russillo and a couple of guys on his Ringer podcast did this. And they basically decided they would program their own music festival. So they would pick and I think people have done it in various ways. We're basically going to pick, if we could do a music festival where you and I get to pick the 10 bands we want to see the most. Our 10 bands.
Exactly. It doesn't matter if they're alive or dead because we have the power to reincarnate them.
They're reincarnated, yes, exactly. And it's not going to be weird holograms like Tupac. They'll actually just be playing somehow live. And moving forward, any band that you feel like we've disrespected by not putting on this list, please, email or give Dad a Twitter, shout, and we'll talk about it next week on bands that, people really seem to love that we didn't,
Yeah.
But again, this is a very personal, very biased list, so.
Go ahead and start. Let's just alternate. You do one, I'll do one.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with a group that, since they came out with Whatever You Think I Am, That's What I'm Not, which is one of my all-time favorite albums. I've seen this band live 7 times, I think. But I still I love them every single time, and that's the Arctic Monkeys. It's just great, very British pop. They fit my criteria of, like, I like my British bands to sound like they're from England, and they do.
Okay.
They just, they've written they have like 7 or 8 albums. They always change it just a little bit. You keep the essence of Arctic Monkeys, but they're always experimenting and trying to take things to new places. I think Alex Turner is just an amazing, amazing songwriter. And live, they just have so much energy. And they have enough, granted, a lot of their huge hits outside of I Bet You Look Good on the Dance Floor and Why Do You Only Call Me When You're High, I think are the big American hits. But over in, Europe, they're just enormous. And they put on a great show, and I think they'd be just a nice way to kick everything right off.
Okay. I think I will open with the Bobby Fuller 4.
The Bobby Fuller 4?
Bobby Fuller 4.
Okay.
From the 1960s. A band that never really got its due. I Fought the Law, that was covered by, I think, The Clash.
Yes, it was.
Some other people, a lot of people covered I Fought the Law. But this is one where they were extremely talented, and they could play all of the music of the different genres in the 60s and sound pretty good. They got caught up in the payola money scam from the DJs, and Bobby Fuller was dispatched by being burned to death in his car.
Oh.
And it's an unsolved mystery. It couldn't be accidental. But they never got to where they could have gone. And I think they were an amazing group. And they have a collection. It's a 3 CD collection called Never to Be Forgotten. And I really, really enjoy it. It's part of my iTunes thing. And I just think that they would be a good band to kick off my concert with.
Very nice. Well, at least for the first night, I have an actual theme for the 3 bands I'm going to throw out there.
Okay.
The next band, one of my favorite bands from the 90s, could technically be playing together live, but the two brothers hate each other to just an unprecedented degree. But just an amazing live act. Again, so many great songs. They broke a number of records of the Beatles that Arctic Monkeys later on beat, and that's Oasis. The brothers Gallagher, you know. Again, I've seen them live. I've seen so many bands talk about them on little, we watch little YouTube videos of bands talking about how much they like, and people just love Oasis, and I do too. And I would love to see them back together. It's hard to say exactly why those two hate each other, and they're not at least doing like a money grab get together, but they seem They seem to really, really hate each other. So it could also bring some fun atmosphere to the show if they decide to go off on each other.
It's interesting because there's a lot of bands. Well, when you're in that close proximity with a band, and there's a little bit of jealousy, and there's a little bit of songwriting credit debate, and a lot of other things. It seems like that's a theme that goes through.
Yes.
So staying on the brothers that hate each other theme, Creed's Clearwater Revival, one of my all-time favorite bands. I would love to see back together with the original cast. John and Tom Fogerty died. He didn't go to their Hall of Fame induction. And a lot of bad feelings between him and John. A lot of it due to the fact that they had a really bad record contract with Fantasy Records. And John wanted out of the contract. The other three voted to stay in. So there were some pretty bizarre albums at the end. One called Mardi Gras, where they'd all told John how much they all wanted to write their own songs. So he let them write their own songs. And so there's some odd songs on this album, Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras and Pendulum are the last two albums, but Mardi Gras is out there in that it's not one of their better albums because John didn't write all the songs. So all John did on there was covers like Mary Lou, different things. John didn't do any of his original stuff.
Huh.
He just did covers of the songs he contributed. That's what he did, and then the band broke up. But they gave birth to a lot of other types of music. They were called swamp rock, which was interesting because swamp rock, you think Louisiana, and they were all from the Bay Area.
Yeah.
But that's the one. I mean, their first album with Susie Q is like Taken in a Bayou, and then they had Born on the Bayou, and they had that whole theme going for them, and none of them were from the area. In fact, it was years later before John Fogerty ever went. He went to the Bayou and did a bunch of songs with like Rockin' Sydney and a bunch of New Orleans artists. But because there's always attributed this term swamp rock. But I would love to see Creed's Clearwater back together and happy, if that could be possible. But I don't know.
Yeah. All right. And I guess rounding out my first night of the festival was probably the most requested cliched artist you could possibly imagine, but they're just phenomenal, and that's the Beatles. As much as people, I think it's almost become cool not to like the Beatles again, but I can't imagine someone listening to the Beatles and not like understanding how influential they were from, bands like Nirvana, obviously Arctic Monkeys, Oasis, the two bands I mentioned before said they were their biggest influence. And since it's my concert, I specifically would like sort of the Sgt. Pepper weird drug years. I love I Am the Walrus and all that. The crazier Beatles stuff. Not that I mind I like the poppy stuff or the early stuff, but I love the once they got weird is my favorite Beatles. So I'd want an emphasis on that. But they could play the whole catalog. I mean, it's a fantasy concert. So.
Interestingly enough, as we talk about it, they were a band that toured one time.
Yeah, only toured once. So only
toured once, but we're a great studio band.
Yeah.
And used a lot of synthesizers and a lot of effects to do their music, and that's what they did. Now, they would have a hard time performing live. It would be interesting to see what they would do live. But a lot of it was just their fear. I think they had basically, they were so overwhelmed by the first tour that they did, and the popularity and the fear they had about getting trampled and getting, taken over by the crowd. That affected their music. But they would be on my list as well. And I particularly liked the White Album. Me and Charlie Manson would like the White Album.
Yeah, and I will say, obviously I wasn't alive to see the Beatles on their concert, but when I watched videos, I mean, as much as you watch girls go crazy, I mean, not just girls, but fans go crazy for your Justin Bieber or whoever your artist of the moment is, like, when you watch the reactions to the Beatles when they came to America that first time and the old videos, it's a different level than the fandom of today. Like,
it was a different, and Elvis was the only thing they had comparable to that before.
Yeah.
unless you get back to Frank Sinatra. But Elvis had that following, but nothing like the Beatles. The Beatles multiplied the Elvis impact.
But I mean, I've never seen I've seen videos of because I mean, people have tried to compare them to whether it's a Madonna, Britney Spears, anyone throughout the years, Lady Gaga, like they have fervent fans, but it wasn't. You watch those videos of the Beatles, and it's insane. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And I get why they were afraid.
And that's why I did the animated movies like Help, and they'd always show people chasing them in all the movies and everything. So,
yeah.
Yeah, Beatles definitely on my concert list as well.
Okay. Does that? Am I moving to my fourth band, or are you sticking? You move?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, keep going. I'll throw the Beatles in the spot too, so you can go.
All right. This band I think could technically perform live, but I wouldn't want them to perform live now. I'd want to take them back in a time machine before people got weird and old. But
okay.
This is the first song I remember in my life because you would sing it to me through a fan. But in the last year and a half, I've become an even bigger fan of Black Sabbath. I never understood until I started listening to songs like Snowblind and some of the other less, I guess, not like the less mainstream tracks. Like they have such a groove, and a lot of what I like today is either considered like desert rock or stoner rock, depending on what you do, and it's heavy, but it's like slow and sort of groovy heavy. And they're obviously the forebearers of that and the inventors of that. And they just have so many good things. And then, yeah, and like I said, I remember you would sing Iron Man through me to a fan to get that I am Iron Man voice as a kid. So I mean, I've obviously had been attached to them forever, but I'd had to put I would love to see them in their heyday, live.
In their heyday would be interesting because I never saw them in their heyday either, and that would have been very interesting.
Like I don't want to see old Ozzy Osbourne right now.
No, I don't want to see old Ozzy Osbourne either. So my headliner band would be the Byrds.
Oh, supergroup.
BYRDS. And the reason is I think the Byrds gave birth to so many different musical groups and genres more than almost anybody I can think of because of the players that were in the band. And this was Roger McGuinn, Chris Hillman, David Crosby, and Chris Hillman went with the Flying Burrito Brothers, and he did some stuff with Southern Hillman and Fury, and then you had Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and then you had Buffalo Springfield. I mean, so you had a lot of things going off, and the Byrds broke up probably because of David Crosby and drugs and fighting within the band. And of all the bands, and they could actually do a reunion because they're all alive. In fact, I saw Roger McGuinn and Chris Hillman 2 years ago at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, and I thought it was one of the coolest concerts I've ever been to. A, it was in the Ryman Auditorium, and B, how good they sounded, and they were both in their 70s. But I would love to see that band back in their heyday in the 60s, late 60s, as they were evolving. But they were an amazing, amazing band. My all-time favorite.
Yes. Well, I feel like we're going to have very little rap and hip-hop, but one of my all-time favorite groups is Outkast, with Big Boy, Andre 3000. And again, they got back together a few years ago and performed in Atlanta, where they're from. And I watched it on YouTube, and it's just an absolutely, sometimes hip-hop, I mean, they've gotten a lot better, but it hasn't always translated to live performances as well. But they bring everything out, and they're absolutely just a phenomenal, phenomenal duo. I think they had the same sort of. We talked. I think a lot of successful bands like their last studio album was two albums. It was a double album, but it was almost like you had the Big Boy album and you had the Andre 3000 album. And when you talk about all-time great MCs or rappers, however you want to phrase it, Andre 3000 is definitely in my top 2, top 3. And it seems like the consensus is when you listen to, whether you're watching The Shop with LeBron or anything else, like Andre 3000's name is always put in that list. And I think there was probably a little bit, and I think the reason they, have only got together for a few reunion shows and aren't working together anymore is that, I think when you have a duo and you start out as Outkast and you're together and then one of you, from both a fashion sense and an ability standpoint and a marketing, Andre 3000 was by far the breakout star, and I think that was hard on Big Boy. But I'd like to see them back, sort of in speaker box and all the sort of aliens and that era where they're a little happier together. I think would be my you know
Okay. Because it's a live show,
yes.
the best performer I've ever seen live is Bruce Springsteen. I've never seen anybody play with that much passion, that much enthusiasm, and that much joy. And length of the concert be damned. He just played till he was tired. And I've never seen anybody light up a crowd like Bruce Springsteen lights up a crowd. So it's not one of my favorite, I have some of his stuff, not one of my all-time favorite artists, but I really, really like, having seen him and watch him perform. And he does some amazing stuff. So I think Bruce Springsteen would be a great performer to probably close one of our evenings in our concert tour.
Yeah. And I think that's an important distinction, is that, like, there have been groups I've liked over the years. Like, I love them, and then I see them live, and if they're not good live, like, it does take them down a notch. And there's been other people where I wasn't the biggest fan, but, it was at like a festival where you're watching some bands you love, some bands you're just there because they're there. And you see a band you didn't really love before, but you watch them perform live, and it takes into another level of respect. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, maybe I'm wrong about this band. Like, they can really bring it.
Yeah.
Well, my next band, given my age and where I've come through, it's no surprise that I would pick a band that, again, this is probably the second band that could not play together today, and that's Nirvana. When Bleach and Nevermind, those albums came out, like, that was just like a musical evolution. I think, I think if you're, whatever generation you are, like, at a certain point, there's certain bands that just define, adolescence, if you will, and your musical everything, and that, Nirvana was just amazing. And, I would love to see them live, and I've never seen them. I've heard them live. I own live albums by them, and they're fantastic live. But obviously, Kurt Cobain is no longer with us, so we couldn't really do that. So that would be the other band I want to bring back and get to see in their entirety.
Well, I'll stay on that theme, but the other band I've never seen, have always wanted to see, and probably had numerous opportunities to go and see, would be the Moody Blues.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I own most of their stuff. It's very pleasant to listen to, but I don't know what it would be like live. But I know they've done numerous concerts at the Hollywood Bowl and Red Rocks, which is the kind of venue that would be good for Moody Blues. And I really feel like I've missed out on something by not seeing them live. I like their music. It's not game changer for me, but I think if we're talking about entertaining our fans at a concert, I think I try and want to have something for everyone. And I think the Moody Blues, depending on where we do our concert tour, and maybe we do it at Red Rocks, I don't know. But I would definitely have the Moody Blues included.
Okay. My next band, I've watched a number of their live concerts on YouTube again, which again doesn't really count as a thing. And they also feature Damon Albarn, who's basically known for Blur and a number of other bands, is I think one of the greatest songwriters of the last 50 years. I think he's just absolutely phenomenal. But he had a supergroup called the Gorillaz that, sort of combine a number of genres. And they have, it's hard to even describe the Gorillaz. But I've seen them live. I mean, I've seen, not live in person, but I've seen them live performing, and it's an absolute just show. And they have different rappers come out for the different rapping parts. There's singing, there's pop. It's very atmospheric. Like, it's sort of all over the place. I mean, they brought full gospels out to perform some of the songs. Some of it's very electronic, some of it's very acoustic. It's just very eclectic, but I love so many of the songs, and I would love to see them live. And hopefully they get back together again and at some point go out and I actually get a chance to watch them. But the Gorillaz would definitely be on that list.
Okay. Again, I'll follow you up on the supergroup. Don't know if they ever performed a concert either.
Oh.
But the Traveling Wilburys.
Oh, yeah.
Tom Petty, Jeff Lynne, George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Roy Orbison. I loved their albums that they produced in the 90s. I loved those. I just think that was an amazing group of people that could, get together. They were all, they were so established that they'd get together without any jealousy, which I thought was amazing. I thought it put George Harrison in a different light, different perspective, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I've always enjoyed Tom Petty. And Tom Petty and Heartbreakers, I'll go ahead and do two here. Tom Petty and Heartbreakers would also be one of my bands in my concert tour. Again, a group that loves to perform and staying power and a variety of different opportunities. And again, staying together despite people doing solo albums and everything else. If you can stay together and avoid the jealousy, that seems to be the thing that either doomed bands or they could overcome it. The Beatles couldn't overcome it, but Tom Petty and Heartbreakers have. And so Tom Petty and Heartbreakers, but the Traveling Wilburys, I think, would be an amazing group. I've only seen music videos of them, so I don't know what they would be like in concert, but I would assume I would really enjoy them. And I think people, because of who the artists were in that band, would enjoy them as well.
Oh, I think definitely. Well, speaking of groups that have somehow stayed together this entire time, another band from the 90s, which, given my age isn't surprising, Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
Pearl Jam's an absolutely just phenomenal live group. Like, they've been, since they fought against Ticketmaster to try to make tickets cheaper for everybody, they've been putting out live versions of almost every show they've ever done. And it's so good live, and they've got so much energy. And again, they stayed together now since I think they started in 90, 91. They just put out a new album. Still very good album. I mean, I think every band, no matter who you are, you have probably a peak, and it's tough to ever,
Yeah, and one thing Pearl Jam also are good people. They were involved with Make-A-Wish with somebody they knew, and just an amazing. You remember Josh Hardy?
Yeah.
Jason, when he was at the Make-A-Wish, his deal was to go back to Seattle, and he got to play with Pearl Jam on a rooftop. Just not a concert, just them jamming with him on a rooftop, and I always thought that was amazing.
Oh, very much so. And like I said, I think they've got every album has one or two and I would say from songs like Alive to even Super Blood Wolf Moon, which is one of the new songs, they have a lot of songs that play really well in a concert setting, where they can extend the guitar session, they can amp up the pace a little bit. Like, they're just an amazing live band that's performed all over the world, will continue to do so. I really hope I do get a chance to actually see them live. Like I said, I've heard whenever they release things, I always listen to them, but I haven't got to see them live in person. And I know that's something that next time they come around, hopefully in a few months when we're unding, hopefully people will also, maybe take these opportunities, while you're sitting at home. Next time, the band you've always wanted to see comes around, maybe you'll be like, I'm going to go, because you never know.
Yep. All right. Can't leave them off the list. The longest playing rock and roll band in history, the Rolling Stones.
Who you have seen live.
I'm going to put a caveat there.
Okay.
And I want the Mick Taylor Rolling Stones from 1969 probably to 73 or 74 before Ron Wood joined the band. I think Mick Taylor was a phenomenal guitarist. And I think he added a lot to that band. I think he was the best guitarist in the history of that band. And he made Keith Richards better, and the whole band was better. But I've seen them 4 times, but I never saw them in that era. I only saw them in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I saw them about 4 or 5 years ago at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Oh. The fact that they can still perform at the level that they perform is incredulous to me. I mean, Mick Jagger still sounds good. He still does his thing. Charlie Watts, Keith Richards. I mean, they're very enjoyable to me. But I would want that version from 69 to 73, those Rolling Stones with Mick Taylor.
Yes. Again, I'll emphasize with this pick, these aren't in order, like, it's not building up to a giant. I mean, the last band would be my closing band, but the next artist would be Ty Segall. And I'd want him to play. Ty Segall is one of those guys, like, he plays just guitar, rock music, but he has a number of bands. Probably my favorite iteration is Ty Segall and the Muggers, but I like a lot of the solo Ty Segall stuff. He's got a ton of energy, amazing live. He's out of Southern California. Like I said, he plays It's very much garage rock, which I've always loved. Sort of that kind of fuzzy, sort of grungy garage kind of sound. And I feel like he's the. If I had to pick one person that's doing it today that does it the best, it would be Ty Segall.
Okay. I am going to go with Dion and the Belmonts.
Dion and the Belmonts. Okay.
I'm going back to the late 50s, early 60s. Doo-wop was a very dominant art form. There was street corner choreographers, street corner choral groups without any musical instruments. And so they made their own sounds, thus the doo-wop thing, which I thought was really amazing. And then when I saw some videos of Dion and the Belmonts, I thought, they actually would do this dance routine, but when they started singing again, they had to make sure they ended up in the same order so their voices sounded right, when they came together. And I was always impressed with that. But I would love Dion and the Belmonts. I'd love to see them again. That's a great example of a guy getting a big ego and leaving the band behind.
Yes.
So Dion and the Belmonts became Dion very quickly. Well, it went from Dion to Belmonts. It was Dion to Belmonts, then the Belmonts split, and then it was just Dion. So, and I never thought either of them were nearly as much as they could have been if they would have stayed together.
So are we on number 9 now, I think, correct?
I think that's about right.
Okay. So for 9, it would be Queens of the Stone Age, a band I've seen live. They fit into the sort of stoner rock, desert rock. They formed out of Caius and like the kind of Southern California scene. And Josh Homme, again, they call him the Ginger Elvis. Just an absolutely phenomenal songwriter. And again, Queens of the Stone Age, like if you listen to their entire catalog, there's definitely a Queens of the Stone Age sort of grungy like sound, but a lot of groove, but they iterate every single time they come out with something. And I've seen them live once. They were absolutely phenomenal. Loved watching them. And they would definitely be on that list.
And I'm probably going to close with Led Zeppelin.
You can't go wrong with Led Zeppelin.
Can't go wrong with Led Zeppelin. Although, the longer they went, the less I liked them.
Yes.
Like the first 4 albums I loved.
Yes.
And then after that, I forget what it was called. Physical Graffiti, I think, might have been the last one I really enjoyed. And after that, I just didn't like them that much anymore. But Robert Plant, that band had great pipes, great voice, great guitar work. The fourth Led Zeppelin album, I think called Zozo, I think it was called, but it had 4 symbols on it. That's by far one of the greatest albums of rock and roll history.
I think that's that album, like whenever you discover Led Zeppelin, and I feel like anybody that likes rock music discovers Led Zeppelin at some point in their childhood.
Yep.
You almost think that's a greatest hits album.
Yeah.
You just assume that that's what this must be Led Zeppelin's greatest hits because it's
got Stairway to Heaven. It's got When the Levee Breaks. California, Going to California. It's got some great songs on it.
Yeah.
But that would be my 10th. Now, I didn't alert you to this, but I also have like a fantasy. If I could create something, what I would create. Okay, you ready for this?
Yeah.
The Jimi Hendrix Experience was Janis Joplin as the lead singer.
Oh.
That's what I would create.
That's cool. I like that.
I think that would be outrageous.
Yeah.
But that would be something I would create.
Well, I'm not sure if I gave you 9 or 10, but my closing act would be 9 Inch Nails. I've seen them live 3 or 4 times, and besides having an amazing catalog of music, which I think they do, they also just bring another level of energy live. I don't know if it's from working with David Fincher and all the, doing all the soundtrack stuff he's done, but Trent Reznor also does something like when you see a 9 Inch Nails concert, it's not just, and again, I go both ways. On some level, like, I sort of like my pizza philosophy where it's just a slice of cheese, and I love a band where it's just the band, they get up there, they play the music. But 9 Inch Nails also does an incredible like visual show where they have tons of cameras and screens, and it's like an entire show you're watching. And they do things with like, different screens coming from all these different places, creating all this weird like visual distortion all over the place. So they sort of, and again, maybe like I said, I know he's worked with Fincher and a number of people, and he's won Oscars for his soundtracks, and I you know, I just think he puts on like an amazing, amazing show.
Great.
And if you need to know how awesome Nine Inch Nails is, the song that everybody loved, "Old Town Road" by Little Nas, with Billy Ray Cyrus, with all those people, they sample a Nine Inch Nails song is the beat of that song. So even today, one of the most popular songs of the last year, Little Nas X was sampling Nine Inch Nails. So.
Good point. And you know how much I hate sampling, so.
Yes.
I won't even go there.
No, but.
So, as we close, let you and I kick around some ideas for the next shows.
Okay.
I think we could each do our 10 favorite books. We could each do our 10 favorite movies. We could also do our 10 favorite music videos.
Oh. That's an interesting one. Yeah. I like that.
Okay. So, listeners, one of those three topics will be we'll both noodle it around this week, and one of those three ideas will be our show.
Yes.
And I think we're going to end, since we're in this crazy time right now, I think I'm going to get in the DeLorean, and if I was going to have my last meal because of the coronavirus, I'll describe my last meal.
Okay.
And you can do the same. We just play around a little bit. And I don't want to get melodramatic and everything, but this is Stephen Kingish. There's no question.
Oh, yeah.
So, obviously, we didn't go to any restaurants this week, so we don't have any good food stories.
We do not, no.
And that might be, maybe it's going to be our great DoorDash meal next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to do my part to keep the small restaurateurs in business through this time. And I want to try and order, some food every week from some of my local favorite places. Or else call there and go and pick it up if we're allowed to do that. But I have a feeling this week we're not going to be allowed to do that. Yeah,
and we'll see how many of them are allowed to stay open. I know we've mentioned Cake Cafe on this a number of times. Up until about 3 days ago, they were doing takeout. They've actually just decided they're going to close for this foreseeable future. And I think Cake, luckily, has been around and been established long enough that, I think they'll come back. But I hope all the other ones that, are going to close are able to come back, too. Because I think we're in a weird spot.
Yeah. That's sad. That's a sad note to end on.
It is.
Because we've talked favorably about Cake, and I've had great experiences there.
Like I said, I have no doubt they're going to come back. It's just that they decided they're not going to do any takeout or anything else anymore.
Okay. Well, I'm going to order from Fat Rabbit this week.
Nice.
Now that I had wings the other day. I still like the buffalo chicken sandwich better than the wings, but I like the wings too. The wings might be easier to transport.
Yeah. Wings hold up really well. Well, hopefully we help distract you for 30 or 40 minutes. And again, if you guys have topics or questions you want us to talk about on the show, by all means, tweet at my dad. We'll get him on here. We're going to need some extra topics over the next few weeks, I assume.
Yep. But we're going to try and make it fun and light.
Yes.
So, in fact, maybe we'll divide the movie genre. Maybe we'll do our 10 favorite comedies or something. So people, things you should be watching. Let's do the movies next week, Jay.
Okay.
Because people probably have run through some things. They'll be looking for some suggestions.
Do you want to go with the all-time comedies as we discuss it on air? Our 10 favorite comedies of all time?
Let's do 10 favorite films.
Okay.
I don't know if I have 10 favorite comedies. Let's 10 favorite films.
Okay.
And let's lean toward the lighter side.
All right. Sounds good.
All right.
So everybody, enjoy your time. Remember, use this time to read a book, kick your diet off, whatever you want to do. Try to find the positive in it.
Stay 6 feet away, and thank God for your health.
Exactly. All right, and we are out.